We are back. Another week of the mush, another week of picking out winners, and a lot more losers, it seems like. But we are back for another week. Appreciate everyone's listens, follows, likes, comments, and subscribing to the channel. Quick recap: I went 4-6. Gorney went 5-5, and John went 5-5 as well. Gorney and I are now tied, one game above 500 at 40-39. So if you are loyal to us, we're making you just a little bit of money. Just enough. But we should let's get it going. Here we go. South Carolina is going to Missouri, 7.5.
Yeah, so we have a tale of two teams here. One, their coach is breaking his foot when kicking a Gatorade cooler after losing to Florida in a game that they should not have lost. They did not play very well in. They did not look good in. And the other one, Eli Drinkwitz, went basically from the hot seat to maybe the SEC Coach of the Year. They're 6-1. They soundly beat Kentucky last weekend. That LSU 10-point loss was kind of tricky because there was a returned fumble or an interception. I don't remember, but for a touchdown late that gave LSU the cover actually in that game. But other than that, Missouri has been playing really good football. I think that continues this weekend. I don't love how the game is being played out. The public in South Carolina, Missouri and South Carolina are pretty much split by the public. A lot of the money's flowing in on Missouri. Don't love the hook at 7.5. If you could buy it down to 7, I would take the Tigers here. But this is one of those situations, and especially in betting, when one team has nothing going right for them and the other team has everything going right for them, it usually is a flip situation, and I would take South Carolina. I just don't think this is the week for it. I'm going to take Missouri. They're going to get Ryan Wingo, it sure looks like, in the next couple of days, and they have a lot of momentum going right now.
They do have a lot of momentum. Everything in me wants to take South Carolina here, but like you said, it's kind of a tricky game, but I think Missouri is definitely the play. They're going to keep riding high, and especially if they keep winning, all these, like you said, Wingo and all these big recruits are definitely going to look more favorable for the Tigers. And they're at home. And you know my little sayings of I like the home team, and but I'm a sucker for Spencer Rattler though. So well, I hope he proves.
We've been for years. Yeah, we have been suckers on him for years.
We'll move on to Penn State, Ohio State. We did want to bring in our favorite expert of Ohio State, publisher.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm giving you that big title now for downtheeyes.com. Austin, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction. Really excited to be talking about this one. You don't get a lot of there's only 3 really huge games on Ohio State's schedule, so to get ready for one this week, Saturday at noon, really looking forward to covering it.
Absolutely. So Penn State is going to Ohio State, like I said, 4.5. Gorney, what are your thoughts on the game? What are you going to pick here for the spread?
Yeah, I would say that's a very uppity way of thinking of Ohio State's schedule, Austin. Very, very, very sad. 3 big games. Oh, jeez. Come on.
Sorry. No offense to Rutgers. No offense to Indiana.
Right. One more year than the West Coast.
Those ones don't really thrill you, huh? Yeah.
I mean, Adam, these are the ones that get people fired up. The ones that make your hair stand up, that you're excited to cover. I wish there were more of them. There may well be in the future, but when you talk about these two teams, that it's going to be a good matchup.
Let's talk injury report. What does it look like at Ohio State for running back? And as I look at the Covers injury report here, it looks like both guys are sort of questionable going in, or is that kind of changed?
Yeah, so Wednesday night, as Ohio State wrapped up, that's the last availability that we have with Ohio State for the week. And we get to see them, coming off the field. At running back, Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, and Chip Traynham were all in uniform. I expect that Travion Henderson will play. He's missed the last 2 weeks. It's been an upper body injury. It was sort of a cautious approach for the Buckeyes. They didn't want to push it. If it had been Penn State in either of those games, I think he would have played. This week it is Penn State, so I think that he will. So you can count on that one. The others, the big ones, Emeka Egbuka, he missed last week at Purdue. He's got an ankle injury. I would say questionable at best for Emeka. And he was in uniform on Wednesday night. We'll see what that means by Saturday. They gave him the weekend to rest. He didn't travel with the team to Purdue. And when you look at with Denzel Burke, we didn't see him come off the field. So we were not even really sure exactly what happened because there the Peacock reviews weren't replays weren't really going in the press box or anywhere. I'm not sure if they exist in any form, but he kind of got rolled up a little on a tackle in the third quarter. We weren't sure if it was an ankle or a knee. He had to be helped to the locker room, and then haven't got any real insight to his status moving forward. But so those are the big ones outside of the running backs, and I would be less probably doubtful more than questionable with those guys.
I do want to say it's kind of lame that the game is on Peacock. It is such a pain. I'm still a cable guy, and like I haven't cut the cord just because I don't want to be in and out of apps constantly for work.
Right.
But it's like I'm trying to watch games. I'm trying to flip during commercials, and then I have to go to Peacock and to watch it's just so lame. That's why it's not streamed in the press box, and all 200,000 Peacock subscribers around the world should be outraged about what's going on.
And then the broadcast itself was, according to the people watching, pretty terrible. So,
right. Yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, in terms of betting this game, the trends are not really all that great. Ohio State's beaten Penn State 5 straight times. Okay, we get that. But a lot of close games in this series. Penn State's 5-0 against the spread last 5 times they've been on the road. In terms of the money on action, it looks like there's some sharp bets on Penn State. It's actually shaping up pretty nicely if you're going to bet it for Penn State. I don't love either side here. If I had to pick, I would take the under. Where are you at, Austin?
Yeah, I've seen so many crazy games between these two programs. Like everything on paper, and if you're betting, it all says, hey, 2 top 10 defenses, so much pressure, high stakes. Like maybe there'll be some nervy moments. The score should go under, and it should be a great fist fight between 2 powerhouses. But that was the case for like 3 quarters last year in Happy Valley, and then everything went absolutely bonkers. Right. And that happens a lot when these teams get together. You think about some of the crazy comebacks, 2017 for Ohio State, some of the ones on the road, 2018, like the wild stuff that happens in these games. So that's always in the back of my mind. Like you mentioned, they stay close. They've been very competitive. Ohio State tends to get the better of them in the end, and I can't shake it. Like even if Ohio State has been trending as an under team throughout this entire season so far, with I think one exception, the series history makes me think it's going to be fun and it's going to be wild at the end.
Yeah. That's interesting. And Penn State's having a phenomenal season, but I don't know how much we know about them yet, honestly. Like, their best win is probably Iowa. They shut them out, but we all know Iowa's offense is completely pitiful. I mean, when your offensive coordinator has to score a certain amount of points to keep his job, and then they score 0, the defense has been very, very good. But against UMass, against Northwestern, against a really average Illinois team, against West Virginia, which they pulled away late, I think this is going to be obviously the biggest test that they have. At least up to this point in the season. Michigan will provide different sorts of problems. Especially, I don't know what Michigan people are at Penn State games taking signs or where they are doing that. I mean, that is
they're probably going to be in the Horseshoe this weekend, right? They're going to sell their tickets.
Very interesting story going out of Ann Arbor today. But yeah, I just don't know. I think the defense is very good, but also very untested. I think Drew Aller on the road has been very, everywhere has been very good, but Ohio State's defense is a little bit of a different animal than going to Northwestern. So yeah. I think it's just going to be, and then, Penn State has been phenomenal against the run, but hasn't dealt with an offensive line like this. James Franklin in big games, I think we know the history there. So I think this, though, is more of an Ohio State Notre Dame game than it is the kind of back and forth game. So I'm taking the under. On the goal line stand, I hope James Franklin has 11 people on the field. We will see, but final score time. I'm actually going to, if I'm taking the under, I should take the underdog. So I'm going to go 21-17 Ohio State.
All right. I picked for over on our site at Dotting the I's. I think Ohio State will win this game 30-20. Like I said, Gorney, like I just think these games tend to get weird. And if these defenses are that good, like they can score too. We've seen Penn State with a kickoff return for a touchdown with Saquon Barkley in this series. We've seen what happened there in 2016 with the blocked field goal to block punt. Like weird stuff just happens when these teams play. And like I said, Ohio State tends to get the better of it. Once it comes down to the clutch, they've had some fantastic fourth quarters in this series. You never want to rely too much on the past. If this is a betting show, which it is, like that doesn't always mean everything. You should be looking at this season. But even from that perspective, I'd say Ohio State, as you mentioned, they went on the road. They beat Notre Dame. That win looks a little bit better today than it did a week ago after that win for Notre Dame against USC and blowing them out in that building. So I think that helps. Kyle McCord answered the challenge late in that game, and this will be something very new for Drew Aller. I think he's a really talented quarterback, but man, to go on the road for your first really huge game against an elite Ohio State defense and in the Horseshoe, place you grew up going to watch games, like 100,000 people, game day, big noon kickoff, all that. That seems like a lot to me for him to handle. We'll see on Saturday at noon, but I think Ohio State will win this game 30-20, and I'm going wild and taking the over.
Before I let you go, one last thing.
Yeah.
Michigan State Urban Meyer rumors all over the place. Is this John Gruden to Tennessee 2.0 or even more ridiculous?
It's even it's about the same level of ridiculous. Unless he's really changed his mind. I mean, I'll just say, when he was retired, we were doing a show with him at his pint house in Columbus. I had a lot of conversations with him about the changes in the college football landscape, namely the transfer portal and NIL. And he was skeptical that his way could really work in college football anymore. I don't know why that would change in his mind, because he's very cognizant of his legacy. People told him that before he went to Jacksonville, that this could do a little bit of damage to your coaching reputation. And lo and behold, that did become the case. Having to go coach against Ohio State and rebuild Michigan State, that makes me even more skeptical. But I've heard it out of his own mouth. Now, that's not been recent. That's not been in the last 2 months where people have been talking about the rumor mill. But of all the places that he could ever wind back up at coaching, which I don't think will be any, I can't imagine Michigan State would be the one to do it. I really can't.
Right.
All right, we go to probably the biggest game of the week, pretty close to it. Tennessee is going to Alabama. Alabama gets 8.5.
Yeah, no, the biggest game of the week, definitely Penn State, Ohio State. No doubt about it. Major national championship implications there. Tennessee, Alabama. Let's get to that one. Let me look at the numbers here. Tennessee has been a team that you thought was supposed to be this offensive juggernaut. Maybe if Nico gets in the game, they will be. This is a flip situation, though. I think this is too many points. So the public likes Alabama a little bit here. The money, some big money is coming in on Tennessee here. And I'm not crazy about the game. I don't trust Joe Milton on the road. I'm sorry. I just don't. Alabama's defense is going to trick him, and he's probably going to make some bad decisions. I just think 8.5 is too many points. So I'm going to take the Vols here. Don't love the pick. There's no real major trends in this game. Other than Alabama's won 5 straight at home against Tennessee. But 8.5 is too much for an offense that just doesn't seem to be clicking on all cylinders for the Crimson Tide. So I'm going to take Tennessee here in a close one.
Yeah, I agreed with you with the defense, and because of that, I'm just going to go with Saban. And my rules, as always, Alabama at home. I hate the number. I don't like Joe Milton like you. I'm waiting for Nico to come in so they can just be in the top 10, and we can look right from our days grinding it out at Warren High. And but yeah, I think Alabama's the play here. I think the defense will hold them just enough. Maybe get a late defensive touchdown or something crazy to get it up to 9 points, and I'll take the win there. I was going to ask you though, because it's kind of a high number at 8.5, but I see here the over/under is 48.5. Like that's kind of like it's weirdly low, but also it's going to be a defensive game. I don't know. That's kind of like a fishy line.
Let's think 48.5. So they're looking at a 28-20 kind of game, one way or another. I actually like the over, honestly.
That's what I was thinking. I was like,
I'll take the over in Tennessee. Yeah.
Washington State is going to Oregon. Pretty big line here for a pretty decent Washington State team. I know that they didn't look very good against UCLA, but 20.5.
Yeah. This is an interesting one because maybe Washington State has been figured out here a little bit. And so I was reading some stories about what Arizona did to them last week, and it was rush 4, drop 8, and make them beat you that way. And Arizona just completely pulverized them. So this is really a question of whether, after a 4-0 start with a big win at Oregon State and beating Wisconsin there, and after seeing Wisconsin again last week, that is not a very competent offensive football team right now. Is this a team that is PO'd and wants to go to Oregon and make a statement, or have they sort of packed it in a little bit? I suspect they're going to play hard. I think Jake Dickert's a very good coach. I think he's going to get them to play hard. And the interesting line here is that Washington State is 11-2 against the spread in the last 13 games against Oregon. So they've figured something out there. That's 13 seasons of figuring something out. So we'll see. Oregon's probably going to win the game. I suspect the shootout after Oregon's loss last week in what was honestly something of ridiculous fashion. I mean, yes, I love aggressiveness and I love making, tough decisions and trusting in your team. But when you're doing things like that, I mean, you got to get with it a little bit. You got to trust your defense that they can, stop a team in 2 minutes going 90 yards. So
Are you talking about the fourth down call?
I do not like how Dan Lanning coached at Oregon State last year, and I definitely don't like how he coached on the road last week, giving Penix half of a field to win the game. So I'm going to take Washington State here. I think Oregon bounces back and wins the game, but 20.5 is a lot of points, and I think Vegas is trying to lure a lot of people in by Arizona blowing them out last weekend.
Yeah, I was going to take – I think I'm going to go Oregon here, and this is why. Because Washington State, weirdly, has only been on the road twice this season, and it's been at Colorado State and UCLA. UCLA, I saw that crowd, and it was about 40 people there.
Yeah,
so they never so they never played anywhere that hasn't been like too crazy. The line's really big, but I think it's going to be Oregon's going to try to prove something. Dan's pissed off because everyone's questioning the way he's coaching in games. So I'm going to take Oregon here to cover it. I don't love it, but the fact that they just never really played on the road for Washington State, and they're not looking very good with scoring like less than 30 points in 2 games.
Yeah.
I'll take Oregon. Texas is going to Houston, 23.5.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those sort of games that I might turn on if those other games earlier are not looking all that interesting. Well, midday, really. There's a sharp bet on Texas, and the public is all over Texas in this game, almost 80% of the bets, but only 55% of the money. A lot of money coming in on Houston. I don't know. I don't really see it. Houston was lucky to beat West Virginia in maybe one of the most lucky situations of all time in college football. Basically, West Virginia driving down the field, scoring, and then in 3 plays or so, Houston chucks it from midfield and they win. But they got blown out at Texas A&M. TCU stopped their offense completely, blown out. They lost to Rice. This essentially is a 2-4 football team against a Texas team looking to bounce back. I just don't think Houston has the horses to stick with Texas here. I'm going to take Texas in a 49-14 sort of situation.
I absolutely agree with you. I'm trying to avoid Texas when betting because I see them. They're all over the place. But Houston's just not a very good football team this year. Like you said, they've gotten lucky with their record. 23.5 is a little high, but not crazy enough, and they'll handle business. All right, Ole Miss is going to Auburn, 6.5.
Yeah, Joe Goodman, my buddy from back in the day when we both covered Florida, wrote this week that if Lane Kiffin loses to Auburn, he should be fired. And I think it was a little tongue-in-cheek, just basically saying that Auburn has been really pitiful recently. They have not been a great football team in the last few weeks. They have not looked good on either side of the ball. LSU blew them out. So after sort of battling Georgia, those 2 losses against Texas A&M, which has so many problems right now. They couldn't move the ball and score. Against LSU, they couldn't stop anybody, and they really couldn't score. So we'll see. Now, if you look at the numbers here, Auburn has been very good against Ole Miss at home. 8-1 straight up in the last 9 games. 6-1 straight. 8-1 in the last 9 games when playing in Auburn. 6-1 in the last 7 games playing Ole Miss anywhere. So those are tricky numbers. Plus, the public is all over Ole Miss, 85%. The money's kind of following right along. The line has moved from 2 to 6. This is a weird game. I don't really love it either way. I don't know if Auburn is sort of kind of given up a little bit after that LSU loss. I suspect not. I just don't know if they can keep up offensively with Ole Miss that can move the ball. I don't love this game either way. I hate the numbers and the trends, but I'm going to take Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm going to side with you on Ole Miss here. First off, just Auburn broke my heart last year, or last week, I should say. I thought they were going to cover. It was a disaster, and Ole Miss will score. And if I only need a touchdown to cover this game, that's plenty.
Yeah.
I don't love always laying on the road, but that number's not scary. And Auburn, now we got trust issues. So
yeah, that trust issue.
All right, Duke's going to Florida State, 14.5. Is Duke still on the backup quarterback?
Duke, yeah, supposedly Duke is going to still be on the backup quarterback here. So this could change. This could change my thinking if he somehow miraculously comes back and makes it a game. But I'm actually going to take Duke here. The public likes Florida State. The money is following Duke heavily. So it's a flip situation, and the line is dropping. So it started at 16.5. It's down to 14.5. Even though the public is all over them. So somebody came in big here and took Duke and thinks they're going to be able to keep it a close game. I do too. I just think that they're too well coached. They're too succinct in what they're trying to do to get blown out here. This is not Syracuse. This isn't Virginia Tech. I think this game is much more like the Clemson game. And I'm not comparing Duke to Clemson yet, but I think even though they beat them, I think it's much more like that game where it's going to be 31-21. I'm going to take Duke here, laying the points.
I'm going to go Florida State here. I'm just going to ride the backup quarterback and hope that's the situation, and Florida State just runs all over them. I can't ever figure out Florida State, and they are a pretty good football team, and they're a good football team at home as well. And I don't think Duke and the boys are ready to get down there. 14.5 does scare me. Florida State will probably win this game by like 7 or 10, but I'll just take the chance that the backup will play and they'll cover that spread line. So we move on. Clemson is going to Miami, and Miami gets 3 points.
Yeah, I don't see how this is a 3-point line. I just don't think Clemson is getting the respect that they should deserve. Dabo said this week that some people should get off the bandwagon if they don't like how things are going. And I know they kind of crept by Wake Forest just a few weeks ago. But they're a more physical football team than Miami, and their defense is much stronger. Miami's coming off back-to-back losses. North Carolina put 41 on them last week. Georgia Tech beat them at home, which we all know was the running when you should be kneeling and winning that game. I just think Clemson is going to be too physical for them. It could be sort of a choppy game. I don't love it in that sense, but Clemson is 7-1 ATS against Miami in the last eight showings. They're 5-1 the last 6 times they played. I don't see how anything changes there. So I think the short number is interesting. There's a sharp bet on Miami that kind of scares me a little bit. But if this is a field goal or under, basically have to win the game, and I'm going to take Clemson to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go Clemson here as well. If John was on the podcast, I'm sure he would try to convince me to take Miami here with the points. But Clemson's a good football team. 3's plenty. They'll take care of business down there. It'll probably be hot and humid, and those guys are used to that actually in South Carolina. But give me Clemson. Utah is going to USC. USC is the favorite, 7.
Yeah, this was almost my play of the millennium. I'm going to take USC here in big fashion. This is everything that lined in a different way than Oregon, Colorado earlier this season. Everything here is lining up for USC to win this game and cover it handsomely. One, it's double payback from last season. So if we're going to bet that Utah is going to beat USC and Lincoln Riley 3 straight times, I don't see that happening. It's also a bounce back situation for USC for playing so poorly at Notre Dame last weekend. And I was probably overly critical of USC on Twitter last weekend, but they looked bad against Notre Dame. I thought the play calling was not very good. They didn't try to stretch the field. They didn't try to use their speed as much as they could have. They just didn't look great against Notre Dame. I think this is still a very good football team, and everything that they care about, which is college football playoff, is in front of them. I just don't know if Utah can keep up offensively with Nate Johnson. So USC's defense has been very bad. There's just no way around it. Notre Dame scored 48, and I know it was a lot of turnovers and all those kinds of things. It's still 48 points. Arizona 41, Colorado 41, a bad Arizona State team 28. It has not been good, but Utah is not exactly an explosive team. I think USC wins convincingly, gets back on track, and everything points to that close of Washington, Oregon, UCLA, which will be pretty mighty for anybody to overcome.
Yeah, I was happy, Gordy, that you had the same excitement as I had with this line at 7, because I think this whole podcast is turning it, like USC was turning into that list of we don't ever touch anything that has USC to do. We cannot pick them, but this line is perfect. I'm a simple man. I only pick Utah at home. Big fan of that team. I think they're a lot better, but SC, who's kind of been every time they win, they go down in the rankings. Every time they lose, they take a big jump down the rankings. It's still a really good football team, and like you said, all your points are absolutely correct. And I think SC will put up a big game here. We wrap it up with Arizona State going to Washington. A pretty big line here, 26.5.
Yeah. This is this is a big line, and the public and the money is and a sharp bet is on Arizona State here. So this is really just Washington came back to win last weekend, feels phenomenal about that, and then kind of comes back to life and does not prepare for an Arizona State team that, quite honestly, I don't know needs how much preparation for. So this is an Arizona State team that's 1-5. However, other than their loss to Fresno State, which was 29-0, which is hard to believe, they would have covered, at home. They would have covered every one of those numbers, 26.5 against Oklahoma State, which is not an explosive offense, especially early in the season. They've gotten better. They would have covered against USC, and they lost to Cal and Colorado by 3 points each, even though they came back miraculously against Colorado and went 97 yards in like the last minute to force overtime and then lost there. So there is also a trend here that's almost hard to believe. But Arizona State is 14-1 against the spread the last 15 times they've played Washington. And they're 9-1 in the last 10 times they played at Washington. So either Washington is the most mature football team in the history of college football and comes out and it's 28-0 after the first quarter, or they're still kind of feeling themselves after that Oregon win last week and the start of a great season. I'm going to side with Arizona State here. If they get blown out, they get blown out. But at least every trend and everything you see tells me that Arizona State isn't going to win the game, but is 49-28 out of the realm of possibility? No. So I'm going to take the Sun Devils.
Going into this podcast, this was actually going to be my lock of the week, and I changed my mind because every time I kept staring at it, it scared me. I'm still going to take Washington here. I think it's the best play. Washington's done well for me in general all year. I mean, they didn't cover last week, but we didn't lose any money. It's a huge line, and I think I'm a big believer in Penix. He's just trying to go for it for the Heisman. I think he's going to keep putting up numbers. 26.5, very, very big, but I think Penix and especially them at home, they'll handle the Sun Devils. All right, wrap up the show with, as always, with Lock of the Week. What do you got, Gorney?
Yeah, let me paint a picture here for you in the Iowa-Minnesota game.
That's what the segment should be called, is Gordy's picture.
Yeah. So the number that I'm seeing for the over-under is 31. And that is absurdly low. I don't even think the Service Academy games get that low. But I still think it's too high. And one of my rules is any number that they put out that seems too high or low is not high or low enough. And so here's what I'm saying. Let's start with Iowa. Iowa is 6-1. They genuinely could end 11-1 and be one of the worst offensive football teams in the country. And they're going to get worse. And here's why. They've thrown 93 passes this year. They in 7 games, they have 4 passing touchdowns. In 7 games, they have 5 rushing touchdowns. So in 7 games, they have 9 offensive touchdowns, which is incredible. That's just incredible. But what's even better in terms of this under is that their top receiver, if you want to call him that, Eric All, tight end, transfer, 21 catches, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns. So he leads in all categories by far. He has twice as many catches than any other Iowa Hawkeye. The next 2 have 10 each. He has 3 of 4 receiving touchdowns. Okay. 3 of 5. That means more than half. And he's hurt. He's out for the year. So their leading receiver in every category by far is out for the year. They can't score to begin with. And their defense has been phenomenal. Now let's look at Minnesota. Not exactly an offensive juggernaut. They're averaging 132 passing yards a game. That is insanely low. I mean, that is insanely low. They love to run the ball. Okay, I give it to them. They've run the ball 244 times compared to 138 passes this year. Well, they have 8 rushing touchdowns. They average 180 yards per game. But then you look at Iowa's defense, and this is the key. This is the key to the under. Iowa's defense is giving up 0 rushing touchdowns on the season. Okay? And they've played Penn State, even though they lost and got blown out in that game. Nobody scored a rushing touchdown on them. Michigan State, and last week, Wisconsin, which they held to 6 points. So I am of the belief that this game could literally be 3-0. I am taking the under, and honestly, I'm honestly surprised that the game is in the 30s, because this game could easily be in the over under in the 20s, and I think people would take the under. So I think both coaches are preparing for a slow running, punting field position game. When Big Ten coaches get in that mindset, that's what happens. This is not going to be up and down the field. So I'm, obviously at 31, it could sneak over. But I'm going to take the under here as my lock of the week.
Oh, so it's not a team. It's the over-under lock.
Oh, yeah. Over-under lock. Over-under lock. A new one. My locks of the week have actually been very good the last couple of weeks. So I'm sticking with an over-under lock. You make the same amount of money, so I'm taking it.
I was going to say I need to kind of go back and find the records, but I think us three combined have a really, really good lock of the week record. I think we've only have 3 losses total, across everything's covering. For me, I'm going to take no pictures here. No, I'm not going to paint anything. Simple man. I'm going to go Colorado State is going to UNLV, and they're going to get 7.5. I think Colorado State's a pretty good team. They look good against Colorado. They just beat Boise State. UNLV's fine. They might end up winning this game. But Colorado State, I feel like, is always on the highlights every week. They always do a lot of impressive things. Like I said, they looked great. I trust my eyes, and they looked great against Colorado, and I think 7.5 is just enough for them to cover. I think UNLV will probably win the game. The over-under is massive, 62.5, so I'm not going to give my lock there. But I would definitely take Colorado State here to make some money. All right. Well, that is it. That's another week of the Mush. That was fun to get Austin on, and good luck to everyone this weekend. We'll see you next week. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, follow us on all the social media platforms, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks, Adam.
See you.